All right, welcome to the channel for the first time viewers. Welcome back from my existing subscribers. Just a quick update. So apparently, Red Gaming Tech and Daniel Owens just recently made some videos about the fact that there may not be a Navi 41 or Navi 42, which means the 800 XT level cards and the 900 XT level cards next generation. So there's a couple of things I just wanted to share my thoughts about it, see what you all think. I don't think it's all bad. Some of it is. As far as competition, it's obviously not a good look. But let's talk about the pros of them potentially not releasing a new card next generation. So talking about AMD, and really we're talking about, for those of you that are even a little bit less familiar, we're talking about let's say a 8900 XT or 8800 XT, not what's out right now. So what's out right now, what's been announced is just unimpressive. I guess to say the least. The 7900 GRE with 16 gigs of RAM, the 7800 XT that everybody's kind of been waiting for, that looks to be barely faster than the 79 or 70 or 6800 XT. So again, just everybody's kind of been waiting for no reason. So let's talk. We'll start with the pros of them kind of prolonging or not releasing a new card next gen. So some of the pros are going to be, cheaper RDNA 3 cards across the board, and the ceiling potentially not being as high price-wise for RDNA 4. So when that 8000 series cards, when they start to come out, if they're only going to go up to the 6700 XT, that's kind of like that $500 to $580 max range, right? So you're going to have, unless they could always just come out and be like, this is our flagship, talking about the 77 or the 8700 XT, and make that one potentially $700, which would be stupid, because everybody would just call them out on the increase on the price. And I don't know, I think that's a bad look. Personally, we'll talk about some of the, not a conspiracy theory, but why I think that could be a possibility later on. But again, cheaper cards, whether it's the 70, whatever comes out this generation. So we already have the 7600, the 70, let's say 7700 XT comes out, and 7800 XT comes out. All that's going to be a lot cheaper as the new generations or the new versions of it probably match that performance. So it's going to also create clearer competition in the mid-range, because that's going to be their main focus, right? So they're not going to be looking at, okay, well, how are we competing with the 5090? How are we competing with the 5080? Because they got dusted when it came to the 4090. Now, if you play games like Call of Duty, not a big deal. They're competitive in that game. But when you talk about, let's say, ray tracing and everything else, or even if you get into 4K, the 4090, it's not even a competition. The 4090 isn't even a competition with the 4080, right? So there's just nothing ahead of it. You have little dots on the map, and then you have way up there, you got a 4090. So again, it's impressive that the 7900 XTX can come close at times, but that's kind of where it stops, right? It's not, that doesn't make it a competition, because at times it's getting blown out by like 80 FPS in the harder to run GPU intensive games. Another pro is going to be, they have an opportunity next generation to fix the misleading marketing and the confusing marketing campaigns that they have, right? So this whole GRE, I think it's the Great Rabbit Edition, which is supposed to be only in China and with already pre-built systems. So that whole thing is just, it doesn't make sense, right? Why did, like, first of all, let's take a step back. The 7900 XTX should have been the 7900 XT. The 7900 XT should have been the 6800 XT. Why they created two of these cards at the top end and then try to backtrack and say, oh, we didn't really mean to compete with NVIDIA's top end. We actually wanted to create these two cards to compete with the 4080. That's stupid. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So I think they just saw the numbers, was like, yeah, Chief, I don't think we got this, and called it a day. Then you have all these other cards releasing so late into the life cycle. I mean, damn near, we're talking about, what's the 5090 going to have in store? The 4090 Ti got canceled, right? So everybody's looking at what the 5090 and what the next generation cards are going to have in store. And again, it just is what it is, right? So you got all these cards. 6800 XT ain't even out yet, but that's supposed to be a competitor, and competing with what, right? Like, did they just slot everything down? Like the 6800 XT is now going to be competing with the 4070 or the 4070 Ti. Like that's a massive L if you ask me. And speaking about the marketing, having a chance to fix the marketing campaign, it's a chance to kind of reset. So with RDNA 5, they can spend more time creating just a massive increase in performance and release RDNA 5 to a lot of fanfare and be more confident in that product and say, okay, look, RDNA 5 is that dude, right? RDNA 5 is going to give you 60, 90 level performance or better. I mean, they literally should be targeting better performance than whatever NVIDIA can offer right now. So they should be looking at double the 4090 performance, right? So if they're going to take a generation off, that's going to be what they should really focus on so that they can come back and not gouge the customers for price. Because just because you're coming out with the better product doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be more expensive. Look at it. If you play Call of Duty, right? The 7900 XTX is going to be one of your best choices. But at the same time, it doesn't cost as much as the 4090, right? So again, it's $500-$600 less and just as good if you can get past the driver issues. But yeah, that's the big thing right there is that you're looking at, okay, an opportunity to reset, get away from all this confusing marketing speak, all these lies that they sometimes will drop in the marketing saying that it's X% faster, and just come back. You could say that if it's going to be true, right? And then make a card that is going to actually be true and say, we're taking this generation off on the high end. It's not because we don't want to compete. It's just because right now what we have is not as competitive as a product as we would like it to be. So what we're going to do is take a year off and come back with something even stronger. And then they can't miss. So if they take a year off and they miss, that's a horrendous. That's a sweep, right? That's like a playoff sweep. Let's talk about the cons, right? So the cons of them only releasing these, the 67 or not 67, but the 7700 XT level. No, let me take a step back. The cons of them releasing a 8700 XT as their flagship next generation are going to be that, okay, well, what actually happened to the generation prior? Because it's not going to be the same level unless they're going to say you can now get 6900 XT level performance, or not 69, but 7900 XTX level performance for X amount of price. So if it's like $520, so instead of $1,000, now you're getting that same performance at $520. That would be good as far as the gamers go, because the 7900 XTX is great value, but that's also pretending that you couldn't have had that performance 2 years prior or whatever amount of time it takes them to release RDNA 4. So I don't know. I'm a guy that's like, okay, I would rather have had this and enjoyed it for a year and a half than waited to save some money. And it is a good savings, but I mean, if you're buying $600-$700 GPUs, $500 GPUs, then you're already spending a significant amount of money. Now, granted, that doesn't mean that GPUs should cost more, but it's not like you spent $250, right? And then you're debating between $250 and $1,000. Like you're already at $500 or $530 versus $1,000, usually discounted to like $900 or $850. So really, it's not that big a difference to wait a year and a half to get that performance. It wouldn't be impressive. It would be cool because that would be the mid-range, but that's also pretending that, NVIDIA doesn't exist. So with the 5070, if it comes out and does the same performance, then it's going to have better RT. It's going to have X, Y, and Z. And if it's the same price, but then you start to tack on a little bit more and it's better performance, then again, that's another L, right? So I really don't fully get this unless they're going to commit to just competing in the mid-range and coming back in. This is something that they did in the past with the 57. So RDNA 1, so 5700 XT, it was a 5500 XT, the 5600 XT, the 5700, and then the 5700 XT. So that was that kind of their lineup that I can remember off the top of my head back then. And again, that was just straight up, what they had as far as there was no anything higher. There was no 5800 XT or 5900 XT. So that is kind of where a lot of YouTubers are looking at the angle that a lot of YouTubers are looking at this story from. Another con is going to be that NVIDIA is going to have a clear advantage when it comes to everything, right? So when it comes to the high range, Intel didn't compete at the high range this time. They kind of went to that 70 class card and stopped. So you're not going to have any competition on the high end. So that just means that we might get a $2,000 5090, and it just is what it is, right? So if you want that performance, it's 2,000. They could come back and say, maybe throw another $100, which wouldn't be horrendous, because I think for the 1599, that the 4090 is actually, it's expensive, but it's the only card that's worth these high prices. Like the 7900 XTX should be maybe $750, $700 in my opinion, right? Because it should just slot down and replace the 7900 XT, which ended up, it was $1,000, but realistically it ended up being an $800 card, right? Because no one was buying it at $1,000. People were just like, okay, I'll just spend a little bit more, and it just is what it is there. Less competition overall in the enthusiast level, so that's kind of like the same thing. If you are looking for that flagship, you're either going to have to choose from AMD's flagship, which is really not flagship if it's a mid-level card, or you're going to have to jump up and crack your skull and just pay whatever NVIDIA ends up pricing it at. And maybe Intel comes out with a flagship product. That would be interesting, because they've started, you see a lot of videos about how their drivers have come a long way, and just overall the performance is better. So maybe that'll be a competitor at the very top. And then the last con is going to be the optics of the entire situation. So the optics, it's just not looking good. What it looks like is like AMD is giving up, right? So that's what the optics of the situation is. There might be some strategy, kind of like I mentioned earlier. We're going to take a year off. I'm not speaking for them. I have no inside information, but it could be something like, I'm going to take a year off and I'm come back the following generation and be even better. It could just be that, the source was wrong and this whole thing is for nothing. And there is a 7900X or 8900 XT and an 8800 XT, right? That could happen, right? Maybe they're, because there was definitely a feeling of rushedness. Is that even a word? Rushedness? Definitely, everybody felt like the RX 7000 series was a rush product because of the vapor chambers cooling, right? So they made how can you make fun of NVIDIA for the power connectors catching on fire, and then your car, they're damn near melting. So that was a big issue. A lot of that has been resolved with the junction temps not hitting 15 million degrees anymore, which was like 115 C is what a lot of them would hit, even on like the lower end power test. So it didn't even have to be like something super, super aggressive. It could just be whatever test, like the Radeon adrenaline stress test, which is like a minute. People were seeing crazy tests within like 40 seconds. But yeah, those are my thoughts on there potentially not being no Navi 41 or Navi 42 releasing next generation. Let me know what you all think in the comments. I try to get to as many comments as I can, so we'll have a conversation about it. It's not the end of the world. It just would be a little bit weird and look like AMD's giving up. It would look like NVIDIA has fair play to just do whatever they want. So we just got to hope that they don't gouge us with that power. Comes great responsibility. So we'll see what happens. All right, with that, I'll catch you on the flip. Be easy.